narcissists aren't normally helped by therapy or counseling. Why do you think that is?
I think, and this is in my book, I go over this a lot because it's really important to, I make a lot of distinctions between therapists who should not treat narcissists and then the ones who should. But narcissists are historically difficult to treat because there's certain things that need to be expected in a therapeutic relationship or a coaching relationship or any kind of relationship, an intimate relationship. One of those things is collaboration. Narcissists do not collaborate in relationships. There's no reciprocity. It's not an actual relating among two people. It's you're relating to them and then they are doing whatever they're doing, but it's not reciprocating back. So they don't collaborate. They don't problem solve. What that means is when you have an issue or a conflict with a narcissist, they are not trying to come to a conclusion in with you so that the problem is solved and then you can move on in the relationship. What they are trying to do is maintain problems and create more. So they're not problem solving, they're not collaborating. Their traits are so inflexible that it's hard for them to see another perspective. So they have a high trait of disagreeableness and you're trying to get them to agree with something. Their high trait of disagreeableness is going to force them not to be able to agree with you by default. So that's a kind of a waste of time type of, trying to get them to adapt or be more flexible. And then the last thing is they don't have any self corrective capacity, which means if they're going about their day and they do something that's pretty horrible to someone else, they don't ever think, yeah, I don't really feel too good about what I did back there. Most people would. It's like that little voice in our head. We can call it a conscience or whatever we want to call it. Most people would question whether or not that was the best way to say that thing or do that thing. And it's typically a natural thing for people who have empathy and have a conscience, and they experience guilt and remorse when they screw up. But the narcissist doesn't go through any of those. They do what they did, and then they don't think that it needs any correcting because they did it right the first time.
Right. And this is where I think the models of a 12-step program become helpful, where the first step is to admit there's some sort of problem. And narcissists, they rarely get to that first step. And if you don't get to that first step, you don't even begin the process of change.
Right.
But there are self-aware narcissists now. I see people like Lee Hammock and others that they go to therapy. Mm-hmm. My personal opinion is I think behavior modification is possible. And I think that cognitive empathy is possible, but they're not going to feel it. Like they're not going to be learning the feeling of empathy.
No, they're not. No. Yeah. Cognitive empathy is possible because that can be taught and learned, right?
Right.
What was the first thing you said before cognitive empathy? Behavior modification.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's actually what we do with narcissists in treatment. We don't do therapy. Well, personality disorder specialists who know that they're working with a narcissist, I'll say that. They don't start with therapy with a narcissist because something's going to happen. A couple things could happen. The moment the therapist thinks they have enough rapport with the client and then tells the client something that's constructive, but that's feedback, the narcissist walks out the door. So we can't do that just yet. Another thing is narcissists often play nice in therapy because they know exactly what the therapist wants them to say and do. So they put on a show and give everything the therapist wants to the therapist, but no therapy is actually going on. It's just kind of like this ruse where the narcissist is playing the therapist essentially. Right. Like, oh yeah, I did my homework assignment and I'm feeling much better now and I'm talking better to my wife now. And then the narcissist gets bored with that because the therapist isn't picking up that they're being manipulated. So they usually will drop out of therapy for that reason too, because they end up getting bored. Or if the therapist does catch on and says, hey, I don't think that's true, then the narcissist will leave therapy because they were called out for something that they didn't like. So that's why we don't always do therapy in the beginning. What we do is we do management. And management is different than therapy. Management is behavior modification. And it's basically, you have to set a treatment frame with a narcissist that's much different than any other type of therapy client that you would be meeting with. And the frame is very strict, and you agree to it. And if the narcissist goes out of the lines of the frame, then the therapist has the right to terminate the therapy. Okay. But management is more, choose something that's really not going well in the narcissist's life, and they have to fix that problem before we move on to anything else. And it's not, tell me about your parents, or tell me about your upbringing, or tell me about any of that. It's not, tell me about your trauma. It's not, maybe you're depressed. It's none of that. It's not, maybe you need medication. It's, there's a problem in your life. There's a problem in your personality. You're exporting it out into the environment. It's causing you trouble, and it's causing your family trouble. We're going to fix this before we move on to anything else. You make an agreement that we're going to work on that. If they don't want to, then they'll probably leave and never come back. And that's the way it is. But vastly different techniques, protocol, methods, approaches working with narcissists versus working with any normal or neurotypical individual.
Sure. And I think, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Lundy Bancroft, but he had written a book about how, and he was an abuse counselor, and he would say the abusers would come to the group, and sometimes they could talk up a great game. They would act like they're the ideal client, they're doing everything right. But it wasn't until he talked to their wives at home that he realized, oh, they were just playing the angel. And they were, as George Simon would say, they were assuading responsibility. They were just being manipulative. But then back at home, they were being the same old terror they always were. And I think it's very important for counselors, therapists, psychologists to know that's a possibility. Yeah, they might just be playing you. And behind closed doors, when they go home, they're the same person they were. Not a thing has changed.
We can't take anything a narcissist says at face value from a self-report about a story about their lives. We just can't. I mean, because this is not an insult. I'm just stating a fact about their pathology. They're liars. So anything that comes out of their mouth, you have to assume might be a lie, right? I mean, that would just be a responsible thing to do when you're assessing a narcissist as a professional. A lot of professionals don't do that. They hear the story and they assume this person wouldn't even come to me just to lie. So,
and I think also some therapists might want to believe, oh, I'm good enough. I'm good enough to help this person.
Yeah.
They wouldn't dream of lying to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. So.
But do you see any narcissists get better or make improvements? Is that something that you see happen at all?
I've seen it very rarely personally, but I have seen it. Individuals who are experts in this field, who even I've been trained under, they have said that for their careers, they have helped a lot of narcissists and maybe even cured some. So
cured?
I don't know the details of that. Those are just the words that they used. But as far as I'm concerned, I have worked with some and I have helped some, and I have seen some maintain, the changes that we worked on for a pretty long time after like follow-ups, but it's rare.
Sure. I mean, I'd be personally skeptical of cured, but the behavior modification part, and I've seen people make drastic changes when they really go all in on something, like you might see in 12-step programs. So, and I've seen it. So I think some change is possible, but it takes the willingness, and it takes the accountability, the honesty, the humility, and the admitting of an issue to begin with.